I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships.
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed.
Oh, I'm starting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
Hi. Welcome back.
I feel like you love putting me on the spot. Whenever we're starting this, I don't get a countdown or anything. We just kind of do stuff.
hmm
That's okay. Man, it feels like it's been forever since we recorded. It's gone for 9 days and did some pre-recording and made sure we had consistent things popping out. But it's my first time actually back with us recording, and shoot, it's got to be a couple weeks now.
Yeah. I did one while you were gone, but
Yeah, I keep hearing about how I have to talk about myself. So,
yeah, you do.
okay, we'll make it happen. I was thinking about while I was gone, I had some interesting thoughts on relationships and basically connection or lack thereof. And, it's interesting because that's the main factor in success or failure of a relationship, right? Is the connection. You read all these statistics online about, finances being X amount percentage of divorce rates, or infidelity being X amount of divorce rates, or this or that, communication issues. But I would challenge those and say that those things are a byproduct of the lack of connection, right? Because at the root cause, it's not the poor finances, right? Now, that is a hot topic. And when people are in that situation, there can be struggle there for sure. When there's infidelity, that can obviously lead to separation or divorce. Uh, Communication, right? Obviously is a hot topic, and that's one we talk about all the time. But the issue there is the root of every single one of those places is the lack of connection, right? When you're fighting over finances, you have a lack of connection. When there's infidelity, it's due to a lack of connection. When you are struggling to communicate, there's a lack of connection, right? And in all of those categories, there's always this lack of connection. So I wanted to talk about reconnection tools and things that we've used when, we've distanced ourselves as far as connection or like anything like that. And essentially things that we can do to help encourage connection or reconnecting. And I think a good place to start is identifying, maybe one thing that we tend to do, like when we're struggling to connect, it starts by being honest and open, right? And communicating about the lack of connection. And usually, we've talked about that before a little bit in the sense of, you coming to me and saying, hey, I'm feeling really disconnected right now. Can we spend some time, or whatever the case may be? But then it begs the question of, okay, so how do we actually reconnect in those times? Right? So one thing that I can say that we have started doing, with putting faith first, is using that as a reconnection tool, right? Especially if we've been disconnected. When I was on my trip, obviously the first night back, just with the flight schedule and everything that had occurred, I kind of just passed out the next night, right? But the night after, it was like this reminder of, hey, like, we have to pray together. We're laying down for bed, we're getting into bed, and this, hey, like, we have to pray. Like, this is important. And I think that can be a huge thing for people, right? Because when you put him at the center of the relationship, it changes the trajectory, it changes the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And that can be a reconnection point. especially if you're feeling really disconnected, sitting down with your partner and praying with them, right? And we've talked about that. And I don't think there's a wrong way to pray, right? And when I've said this before, when I tell people, hey, there's a difference between your praying and you actually laying it all out there and being vulnerable, right?
Mhm.
A lot of times I've received pushback in the sense of, oh, well, it's not like there's one prayer that's better than the other or whatever, right? Which is true, right? But there's a difference in how you feel when we say, okay, I'm going to lay it out there, I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to go all in on this prayer
Mhm.
versus me just doing it out of, well, I guess I have to,
Yeah.
right? And that is a major reconnection point for us is like when we pray together and we put that out there and say, hey, we're going to lay it out all on the line and be vulnerable and put in effort, it reconnects us, right?
Mhm.
And we have that connection piece between us. I don't think that's the only reconnection tool, but it is a great starting point.
Mhm.
Another thing that we've done is spending intentional time, right? Making time. And sometimes you don't have the ability to spend, say 2 hours of intentional time right now. But
Yeah.
if your relationship is struggling and you need to reconnect, sometimes it's just about that 5 or 10 or 15 minutes where you don't have the TV on, you're not on your phones, and you just say, okay, sit down on the couch and talk, right?
Mhm.
Hey, how are you feeling right now? What's going on in your life right now? What are your thoughts? What are your internal conversations right now?
Yeah.
And that also, for us has been a huge tool. Now, there's a lot that goes into that, right? And we don't have to pretend that, hey, depending on the stage of the relationship or the state, I should say, currently, that one can be a real challenge, right? Because sometimes you don't know how to communicate. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of connection. So, how do you encourage these connection points, right? To help lead up to these little bit bigger steps like the actual communication.
Mhm.
And, like one thing we've implemented too is like when I walk in the door, you block me and purposely kind of stand in my way at times, right? And sometimes I mess with you and we'll be playful, but at the end of the day, within a minute or two of me being in the door, like there's a pause of like, okay, there's nothing else going on until you give me a hug,
Yeah.
right? And just taking 20 or 30 seconds to hug and connect and say, hey, I've missed you today, and be able to connect in that moment to help jumpstart that connection after being gone.
Yeah. I kind of think it's all about your intention behind wanting to reconnect to, or like your intention behind the things that you're doing to reconnect, if that makes sense. Because, there was a period of time where we had weekly relationship check ins, and they were supposed to be times of reconnection during the week to check in with each other. And it kind of got to a point where we weren't actually like using it for that. Like it actually kind of started just being like a chore or like,
Hmm.
mm, like I just don't want to do this today. I don't want to, whatever.
Hmm.
And so I think that a lot of it is like the intention behind it, because if you're not like genuinely wanting to reconnect or genuinely wanting to know how your partner is doing, then those things can turn into just routine things that you do that don't actually have any meaning. It can be labeled as, oh, we're reconnecting, but are you actually reconnecting? You actually taking the time to commit to, figuring out what's going on in your partner's world, to genuinely want to explore how to reconnect with them and to make that connection again. Because when you are struggling, like, it can be really hard to pull yourself out of that, you know? And if one person like wants to, but the other doesn't, you know, like sometimes it is on the other person to kind of like initiate that and try to, you know, really get that connection going again with your partner. And I think if you have intention behind it, like your partner's going to feel that. But if you're just doing it because, you know, you feel like you're supposed to, or whatever the case is, like that might not actually bring you any closer. It might not actually be a reconnection tool.
Yeah, that's a good differentiation between that too. Is, it's, I guess, with most things in life, a lot of it has to do with your intention, right? And what your intent behind every action is. And that's a really important point of, I guess, understanding, in the sense of, if you are going to use a reconnection tool or any sort of, action or tactic to attempt to reconnect with your partner or your spouse, you have to have the connection or the intent to connect behind it, not just the, well, I know we're disconnected and we're supposed to be connected, so I guess I might as well make a valid attempt at this,
Yeah.
right? And those are two really important differences between those two things, to say, hey, I want to reconnect with my spouse. I miss my spouse or my partner. Okay, I need to reconnect with them so that way I can get us to a better place and get our relationship back on track, or get our relationship back to a better place, right?
Mhm.
And that's where I think that those reconnection tools, and the level in which they work or don't work, or what tools to use at what time, are going to vary based on, that intent and really how disconnected you are, right?
Mhm.
Because you can do like any sort of activity, right? And a lot of times I think that we have this grand scheme, or like this, it has to be grand, right? Oh,
Mhm.
well, I have to go on a date night and go out to an expensive dinner, and we have to get all dressed up, and we have to do all this for us to reconnect. And like, those are important, right? Like, having date nights are important, and we'll do a whole podcast talking about, date nights and stuff. But the flip side is that we also have to realize something extremely simple can also be our reconnection, right? What if we just sat down and said, hey, uh, imagine you want to go on vacation, and I want you to close your eyes and picture what that looks and feels like. Okay, cool. Let's draw it out, right? And you both sit at the kitchen table with your own piece of paper and a pencil or a crayon or a marker or whatever, and you draw out like where you want to go on vacation, right? Like, just the action of sitting there doing something together can be this reconnection tool. Or, when's the last time you did a puzzle or played a board game with your spouse, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we did that recently, right? Where we inadvertently turned what was supposed to be a learning opportunity for the kids into a game, right? Like, we hadn't done puzzles in a long time, and we had this grand idea of, hey, the kids are fighting, they're spending a lot of time disagreeing. So, okay, tonight, instead of just doing a movie night, they have to earn it, and they have to work together to put a puzzle together.
Mhm.
And then they did, and they did it really quickly. And then they had a lot of fun. And then they didn't even want to necessarily have a movie night. They wanted to sit there and put more puzzles together, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that can be used in your relationship, though, too, right? Of these simple tools or tasks, right? You can get a puzzle for $10 at Target or Walmart, right? You can do some of these other things um, to really spend intentional time with your spouse or partner and to help reconnect with them, right?
Mhm.
And I think that part of the connection issue is we have this predetermined notion in society of like, well, no, the only way to date your spouse is to go on this big, massive trip or to go on that grand night out to dinner, like I had mentioned, right? And
Mhm.
we don't think about just the little connection and the tools that we can use to help, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be as simple as those good morning texts,
Mhm.
and saying, hey, like, good morning, beautiful. Or, just throughout the day, hey, I was thinking about you, randomly at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, hey, I love you. Right.
Yep.
And those little things can mean a lot when it comes to reconnecting with your partner or continuing to cultivate connection, right? Maybe it's not necessarily about reconnection, but you're trying to grow the connection.
Yeah. I think that things like relationship check-ins can be a really good tool to have, but that's kind of where I was going with it earlier. Think that you need to make sure that you're actually doing it with the intent of connecting with your partner and not just something we have to do.
Mm.
Because actually, like, laying out, like, a weekly check-in where you connect and take that time to, like, be present and learn more about your spouse and find out, what went on in your spouse's week and what they have going on next week and how you can help and, how you can be there for them during that time. Like, those are all really great things to do, and I actually think you should be doing them, but it is about that intention behind it. We started planning like weekly lunch dates where we would just go to lunch together once a week so we can use that time to be intentional and connect during the week because it does get busy during the week and we may not always have time to make that time, but if we have a set lunch date every week, we know that we can have that time to be intentional with each other. There's the whole like, what is it? Like 1-3-7 rule or whatever, where you're supposed to like,
Yeah, I've heard it every 1-1-1, 2-2-2, 3-3-3.
yeah, where you're supposed to like go on one big vacation a year and like
Yeah.
one or two date nights a month and, I don't know. I don't even remember what all they are, but I've seen those and I do think they are good and could be really good like reconnection tools as well. It doesn't work for everybody. Like not everyone is in a state where they can, just take vacations all the time. And that's okay. Like I don't think it even has to be you going away. It's more about that intentional time. Maybe you just have a weekend vacation in the house, maybe the kids go somewhere, go stay with grandparents for a night or something, and you just have like a vacation together in the house, but you make it really intentional with your time. Um, there's a lot of things that I think you can do to build that reconnection toolbox. It's just a lot about the intention behind it and actually making sure that you're doing it for the right purpose.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a good point. We can talk about the intention behind certain things, and like let's use this last trip that I took, right? And it's really interesting because a lot of people have mentioned how I came back, different, how I I was more, I don't know, glowing, vibrant, whatever you want to call it after this trip. And a lot of people assume, oh, it's because you took a vacation, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't really. Yeah, I got to spend a couple days with family. Most of those days I spent actually working on stuff and working on business, and then I had the event that I went to, and it was more about that time, right? Which obviously is, I guess, a little bit of a weird way to look at it, but it's the same thing when you talk about the time with your partner, right? And you can go on a vacation with your partner, you can take them on a big trip, but if you're not being intentional, if it's just, oh, well, we have to do this to do it, right? Like,
Hmm.
you're not going to get the same results out of it as opposed to being intentional with that time, because even like while I was on the trip, right? Like, okay, well, I'm 3,000 miles away. So, or whatever it is, I don't even know, probably 5,000 or, um, miles away. Well, it's pretty hard to go on a lunch date, right? Like, I'm not going to send you French fries via carrier pigeon. So,
Yeah.
but we found a way to basically say, hey, like, okay, let's, spend some time and, essentially FaceTime you and have like a virtual date, right? But it was more or less just about spending that time for an hour or two.
Yeah. Well, and even when you were gone, there was like one day that I was kind of like, man, I'm feeling really disconnected from you. And we figured out a way to, spend some intentional time just talking to each other. And it didn't even have to be like, it wasn't even on a phone call, I don't think. I think we were just texting, but it was just actually making the time to like be present and intentional and like spending that time with each other.
Yeah.
Because I think, that is something that I think people struggle with if, spouses go on work trips or, have to be away for long periods of time or whatever. Like you just kind of get in the zone or whatever and don't really think about, like, hey, I should reach out to my spouse. And there can be that disconnection. But I think it's important, like, if you are feeling disconnected, to be intentional about letting your partner know. So maybe you guys can figure out something to do
Hmm.
during that time so that, your partner feels like you're wanting to connect with them, even if you're not close to them at that moment.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times that reconnection can just be a small action to remind them that you're thinking about,
Hmm.
you know, um, and it's one of those things that sometimes, especially depending on the state, like if your relationship is in a bad place right now and you're struggling to really come together, right? That maybe it's baby steps,
Hmm.
and maybe it's going to look weird for a little while with your partner because you guys have been so disconnected for so long, right? And maybe you have to remember how to reconnect, but being intentional with those things, whether it's playing a game with them, whether it is actually going out on a date, taking them to dinner or a movie or bowling or to play pool or to play darts or, go-karts or golf or what, like whatever it is, right? There's a ton of different things you can do. I mean, even a walk, right?
Yeah.
But like that's the biggest thing is that people overcomplicate this. They overthink this, right? They get in their head about it and like, oh, I don't know what to do. We're so disconnected. I can't reconnect. Go for a walk around the block and hold your partner's hand, right? Like that is something free. It doesn't cost anything. And at the end of the day, like leave your phones at home, walk around the block, hold hands
Hmm.
and see if that doesn't change, the way you're feeling in that moment.
Well, and just even little intentional things like you talked about sending good morning texts. Like in the beginning, it might be weird, especially if you've never done it. But if you start consistently doing it each day, like it does lead to like that morning connection. And like, I think whenever you started doing it consistently all the time, then if you don't do it now, I'm like, excuse me, where's my good morning text? You're like, oh, I'm sorry. I was busy. I'm like, okay. But
Yeah,
it's just a little way for us to connect like first thing in the morning.
right. Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's the thing is when you know, are intentional, like you said, about the connection and essentially doing those little things to just try and connect with your partner, it starts adding up, you know? And like you said, like even with the text thing, like I had never really done that with you for a long time. And then, you know, it became this thing of, uh, I can't with this dog.
I feel like in the background of this podcast, you guys are going to hear our dog walking around, prancing his little paws all over the place. At one point, he was over here like snoring, and now he's standing next to me snorting because he wants attention. Dude, what is your deal?
Yeah, so distracted. Um, anyways, the you know when we first started doing that, or when I first started doing that, it, you know, like you said, it was maybe a little weird because I hadn't done it really in our relationship. But then when it became consistent, you know, it's this thing of it's just part of the morning routine now, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, now it's a way to identify like, hey, you know, if I don't say good morning or whatever, and actually, you know, you tend to actually think about that and go, hey, like, what's up? You know, like, where's my text? Like this and that, right? But it also becomes an indicator for you of like basically, you know, potentially like my day is going, right? And when you talk about connection, like understanding your partner and knowing what's going on in their life can be a huge point of connection. So looking for those patterns and those pattern changes, right, is another tool to reconnect with your partner and being able to actually identify and pay attention to your partner and say, uh, you know, you do X, Y, and Z every day. Today you only did Y and Z. What's
Mhm.
going on? Right. And that can be a way to connect with your partner and actually have a conversation and say, hey, I just, you know, wanted to see how you're doing, this and that, and open the door to a conversation and, you know, an attempt at reconnecting or attempt at connecting and continue to cultivate that connection.
Well, I think that's a good spot to kind of give our little weekly to do
Action step.
action step. Okay, there you go.
Okay. So this week, you have to pick one new way to connect with your partner. For the guys out there, start with the good morning text. I want you to do that and just do it consistently. And if you have to put a reminder in your phone because you haven't been good at this up until now, then put a reminder in your phone because you will be good at it now.
Yeah, it'll mean a lot.
Yeah. But additionally, for the men or women, pick one way that you're going to reconnect or attempt to connect with your partner this week. And think outside the box. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It doesn't have to be planning this massive date night and trying to get it perfect and overthinking. And then you're upset because, you know, things didn't go according to plan. Pick something small. Do a puzzle with them.
Go play checkers.
Go play checkers. Yeah. Some type of board game with them. You know, get a flashcard game, get a couple's flashcard game,
Mhm.
right? Or even you can go online for free and look up questions to ask your partner and sit down and ask your partner questions. Even if you think you know the answer, a lot of times these answers to these questions are going to change every 6 months to a year. So if
Mhm.
it's been a long time since you've connected with your partner and played the like, hey, we're new in dating game, let's learn about them, you'd be surprised how a lot of these common questions change over the years. So spend time asking them common dating and common, you know, new relationship questions and just see what their answers are.
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually really like those questions and just occasionally asking each other questions because you really don't actually know what their answers are going to be. You often think you do, but usually it's not really the answer you're going to actually get from your partner. So that's a good one. All right, guys. Well, until next time,
See you next time.
bye.